Welcome to this new automotive news video for Tuesday, June 2nd, 2026. Today we're going to talk about a new brand that's coming soon to France and simply wants to offer the cheapest new car on the French market. We'll also talk about Renault, which has just announced even lower lease payments than during the previous social leasing program, Stellantis, which is preparing a major change that will simplify maintenance for millions of cars. And MG, which wants to compete with premium German brands while keeping entry-level prices. I hope the topics I've chosen for this video will interest you. If that's the case, I count on you to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for future videos, boosting this video if that option shows up for you, and of course by leaving a comment where you share your thoughts on today's news. While Dacia has dominated the affordable car market in Europe for years, perhaps even more so in France, a competitor that everyone had forgotten about is back and now wants to beat Dacia at its own game, namely by offering the cheapest new car in France. This brand is called Yugo. It's a Serbian brand that was known in the 1980s for its small, simple, and inexpensive cars. The brand disappeared at the end of the 2000s. It changed owners, and it will now be back in 2027. And Yugo wants to keep exactly the same concept, which is to offer the simplest and cheapest car possible. The brand is finalizing the development of its first model, which will obviously be a small city car, and the first prototype will be unveiled in 2027. Very surprising, this new Yugo will not be a 100% combustion engine car. It's true that we're used to seeing 100% combustion engine cars as generally being the cheapest on the market, but this one will be a hybrid, a rather special hybrid, since it will be a range extender hybrid. What that means is that basically, it will be an electric car with a rather small battery, on which a combustion engine will be mounted, and thanks to the gasoline in the car's tank, it will generate electricity on board while driving. In principle, the combustion engine will never directly drive the wheels, which is somewhat similar to the e-power system found in Nissan vehicles. The brand confirmed it's developing a 4-cylinder engine with a partner to use as a range extender. Nothing is official yet, but strong rumors suggest the engine will likely come from Horus, which is pretty amusing, because Horus is a Renault subsidiary focused on combustion engines, and Renault also owns the Dacia group. So if this happens, Renault is about to supply engines to one of its future major competitors, which could end up putting one of its own brands in trouble. The head of Yugo mentions an entry-level price set at around 12,000 euros. If Yugo manages to keep this promise, indeed, this car will be 1,000 to 1,500 euros cheaper than the current cheapest model in France, which is the Sandero from Dacia, starting at around 13,290 euros. At this price, the Sandero runs fully on gasoline, while the Yugo will be a hybrid with a range extender. A hybrid at this price is unprecedented. To offer such low prices, Yugo relies on two factors. First is high production volume. They believe that because it will be really inexpensive, the brand will be able to sell hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, and that thanks to this, they can achieve major economies of scale, which will still allow them to make a profit on their sales. And the second thing is the place of production. Because, as you might have guessed, this Yugo won't be produced in France. It will be produced in another country where labor and energy are much cheaper, Serbia. What we don't know yet is to what extent Yugo will rely on Chinese suppliers to reduce production costs. If the engine comes from Horus, well, then it will technically be 1/3 Chinese, since Horus is owned by Renault, but also by Aramco and Geely. Geely is a Chinese brand. We don't yet know about the rest of the vehicle's components. The real question to ask now is whether Dacia should start worrying. Because Yugo, if it arrives in 2027, which is soon, is coming at a time when Dacia isn't doing so well. Let me remind you that in Europe, since the beginning of 2026, Dacia has seen a 15% drop in sales compared to the same period in 2025, mainly because Dacia wanted to change its concept a bit and move away from being low-cost to go slightly more upmarket. Let me tell you, if the situation doesn't improve quickly for Dacia, Yugo might arrive at a particularly difficult time for Dacia. Social leasing is returning to France in summer 2026. And Renault plans to use it to sell electric cars. I'll quickly recap the new social leasing terms. There will be 50,000 entry-level electric cars that will be financed with this financial boost. To take advantage of it, you must be of legal age, reside in France, and have a reference tax income of less than 16,880 euros. You must use your personal car to get to work and live more than 10 kilometers away from it. Renault has really benefited from this social leasing. Already in 2025, it had delivered 15,000 electric vehicles through this program. This means the Diamond brand alone made up nearly 1/3 of vehicles benefiting from the program. Renault aims to achieve this again. It has just revealed the prices of its main models eligible for social leasing. You'll find the Renault Twingo Electric in the Evolution trim with 80 horsepower and a range of 263 kilometers offered from 130 euros per month on a 37-month lease for 45,000 kilometers. The Renault 5 Electric in the Evolution trim with 150 horsepower and a range of 410 kilometers for the same duration and mileage, will be offered at 139 euros per month, so only 9 euros more than the Twingo. The Renault Megane Electric in the Techno trim with 220 horsepower and a range of 468 kilometers will be offered starting at 190 euros per month. And finally, this might be the strangest offer of the bunch. The Renault 4 Electric will be offered starting at 170 euros per month in the 150 horsepower version, with a range of about 400 kilometers, still over a period of 37 months and 45,000 kilometers included. It's quite a bit more expensive than the Renault 5 Electric, even though the Renault 4 is currently one of Renault's electric models that's having the hardest time selling. If they wanted to boost Renault 4 sales, this probably isn't the best way. In any case, Renault now offers a complete range of electric vehicles available through social leasing, from the small city car to the family compact. Renault will open pre-orders for these vehicles through social leasing starting June 16, 2026. Which is 1 month before the official launch of social leasing scheduled by the French government for July 16, 2026. In other words, for 1 month, you can start going to Renault to pre-fill your application so that it will be among the first and have the best chance of being accepted by the program. In the meantime, make sure to get information about social leasing. I made a pretty comprehensive video on the subject. There are quite a few hidden costs, especially the fact that, for example, you are required to have comprehensive car insurance, which is much more expensive than basic liability coverage. Also, the fees at the end of the contract when returning the vehicle can be very high. And in social leasing, you only get small cars that really aren't very versatile. Even a Megane, which is advertised with 468 kilometers of range, actually does around 250 kilometers in real conditions on the highway. So it can be a very good opportunity to switch to an electric car for cheap, but it can also turn into a trap you never get out of. That's for you to judge. Maintaining your car could soon become much simpler thanks to Stellantis, as the group has just announced a change that could potentially affect millions of European drivers. Until now, each brand in the group had its own recommendations when it came to engine oil. For example, an Aston Martin might not have the same oil recommendations as a Citroën, even with the same engine. And these recommendations also differed from those for an Alfa Romeo. But that's over now. Stellantis has worked in partnership with Total Energies to develop 2 different types of oil, grouped within a single oil family that will become the only oil recommended by Stellantis for all models in its range. So I'm specifically talking about the models in the European range because obviously if you've bought a Ram V8 Hemi pickup, it's not the same oil you need to put in it as in a Peugeot 208. From now on, the only oils recommended by Stellantis for all models in its range will be Total Energies Quartz Mopar oils and Total Energies Quartz EV3R Mopar Sustain oils. According to Stellantis, they are able to provide the same level of protection, reliability, and performance on vehicles that are actually very different from each other. A simplification, and above all, a standardization that still raises a few questions. Because indeed, when you use the same oil for a 1-liter PureTech engine in Peugeot or Citroën, that can be understood. But when it's the same oil for the 1.3-liter, the 1.5-liter, the 1.2-liter, the 1.6-liter, when it's the same oil for both gasoline and diesel engines, that's still quite surprising. The good news is that anyway, since oil changes for Stellantis cars happen while driving, after just a few kilometers, especially if you're driving with a 1-liter PureTech, if you haven't put the right oil in your car's engine, the advantage is you won't even have time to start the engine. And on top of that, you'll quickly have the chance to try a new one. To finish, we're going to talk about MG, which is tired of being seen as, let's say, the really cheap Chinese brand sold in Europe, even though that's exactly what the market needs. Right? Cheap and simple cars. MG still aims to make more upscale cars and compete with German brands, launching 2 new models, the IM5 and IM6. So the IM5 is a large electric sedan that's 4.9 meters long, while the IM6 is also an SUV that's 4.9 meters long. These vehicles also exist in China with range-extending combustion engines. But for Europe, MG has chosen to focus only on fully electric versions, at least for now. The IM5 will be offered in 2 different versions. The first entry-level version will be based on an older 400-volt architecture with a 73 kilowatt-hour battery, 300 horsepower, and a charging power of 153 kilowatts. The high-end version, like German brands, uses a much more modern architecture. The 800-volt version comes with a 96 kilowatt-hour battery, 750 horsepower fast charging at 350 kilowatts, and a range of 650 kilometers, enough to easily compete with top European electric models like those from BMW, for example. We don't know the prices yet, but we do know that MG wants to launch sales in France and Europe by July 2026, and they're aiming for prices that are 7,000 to 10,000 euros lower than those of the vehicles they'll be competing with. We'll see if they manage to achieve that. In any case, for that, they'll soon be able to rely on new European factories, because the problem with Chinese cars is that when they arrive in Europe, they're subject to heavy taxes, which means their prices are doubled or even tripled compared to the same models in China. MG has just announced that, for the first time in over 10 years, the brand will start manufacturing models on the European continent again. They will invest 200 million euros in building a new factory in Spain. The factory will open by the end of 2028 with a production capacity of up to 120,000 vehicles per year. And these 120,000 vehicles, since they will be manufactured in Europe, well, won't face any tariffs. By then, the European Commission will probably have found new obstacles to put in their way. We'll see. In the meantime, that's it for today's studies. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, I'm counting on you, as usual, to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for the next videos, and maybe even becoming a supporter by clicking the join button below. I'll see you tomorrow for the next one. Bye.